What's up, y'all? This is me trying to make another video. I do not understand how people make videos so quick, but I guess it doesn't matter for me because nobody watches my videos anyway. So to be honest, there's not really any pressure for me to make a bunch of videos. But anyways, I'm here to get into the first round of the NBA, talk about some of the games and series we just saw, really go in on what happened in the first round, and talk about what my predictions were, and what predictions were right, what predictions were wrong, and then maybe some outlook into the second round, even though that's already started. So the first round is actually wrapped up, and we have so much to talk about because this is a year where we actually get a good first round. In years past, we would be lucky enough to have a few quality first round matchups, but this year we kind of got spoiled. I wasn't this excited probably since maybe the 2014 playoffs where we had so many crazy games and series that went to 7. But this year, I would say it's pretty similar, but the teams, you actually feel like they could maybe even go further than some of the other teams that kind of just went to 7, but when they got to game 7, you kind of knew who would win. I'm going to briefly go over what I thought and how I can see those teams faring in the future. Denver versus Minnesota. So I don't think the outcome of this series really surprised anyone. Minnesota was actually trending upward for the past few weeks as the season came to an end. Cat came back. They kind of figured out this whole too big situation that many thought was why they struggled early on, and Ant had been balling. Then the first play-in game happens, and they actually give the Lakers the business for most of the game. Things don't really go their way, of course, but they go on to the next play-in game and they dominate. That momentum stops going when they get to the second round versus Denver. Denver shows why they were the first seed. A lot of people don't believe in Denver. Even some people are comparing them to the old 2015 Atlanta Hawks, fake first seed, all that talk. But a series like this really shows that they aren't playing with their food, and they could go to the finals if things go their way. Minnesota did about as good as you would expect. Good for them getting that one win after the crazy season that they've had. At the end of the day, their team doesn't work, and they're going to have some big decisions to make in the offseason as their fit and chemistry is under some big scrutiny. Denver wasn't flawless, but I will say this wasn't really an alarming series for them at all. Bucks versus Heat. Okay, I'm not going to lie. I'm very honest when it comes to my predictions, and I really hope Miami will be able to make some noise and make this a competitive series, and look what we got. I thought they had basically no chance to take the series, especially in 5 games again. But really, it's hard to excuse Milwaukee, even with Giannis missing those first 2 games. If you're supposed to be the crown jewel of the East, then you got to do better than going out in 5 to a Heat team that had a bunch of injuries as well. I think this is the end of Budenholzer's time in Milwaukee. Correction, as of today, it definitely is the end of Budenholzer's time in Milwaukee because he just got fired today. I think the 2021 run, which some people call questionable because they were facing a lot of teams that had injuries, I gave him a little more leeway with the front office than he maybe deserved. But it's time for Milwaukee to bring someone else in. They're probably starting to get an older team that understands maybe we shouldn't go all in the regular season and kind of save some steam for the playoffs. Now Miami, they've impressed me. I know hashtag Heat culture has become kind of a meme at this point, but that stuff is real, especially with Jimmy leading them. They came in and took care of business after being written off most of the season. I thought at best they could bring it to 6. I didn't think they would win, but I really love this little rivalry that Miami and Milwaukee has had. And in many ways, I was rooting for Miami. I think they proved that they still have a shot to head to the finals if things go their way. They play Boston really well, Philly's vulnerable, and they can beat the Knicks, so we'll see how things go for them. Lakers versus Grizzlies. I think this was a big series that revealed a lot about each team. The Lakers are the biggest team in the league. They will always be under the microscope no matter what happens. It's hard for people to talk about the Lakers because they can't throw away their bias, whether it's some positive bias or negative bias. Many people were criticizing the Lakers saying they weren't that good, the schedule's in their favor, or the rest, all the usual excuses that you'll find yourself making if you're a hater. Ultimately, they came in, took care of business, and show that they're a legit team this year. Funny that we find ourselves 3 years away from the bubble, and Miami and LA are kind of in similar positions. I think the Lakers kind of have a legit shot to go to the finals too, and it shows how open these past couple years have been. I thought they were winning the series before it started, but I didn't think it'd be as convincing as it ended up. Now, on the opposite side, we have the Grizzlies. I know they were banged up, but I don't think they're completely off the hook. All year while the Grizzlies were playing well, a lot of people were out there basically saying, oh yeah, well they're playing well, but their immaturity is going to get the best of them, and ultimately they're going to go out in some stupid way. So we weren't too far off on that. All the extra talking is fine. It's the playoffs. I get it. I understand that. But some of the stuff they were saying was honestly just stupid. The amount of coverage this Dylan Brooks drama got was dumb, and he put himself under the microscope for no reason. Then these guys go and skip their media availability when they lose. But the times they won, it was more dumb comments and more nonsense. I think this team is going to have to look into a coach that has more sway in that locker room and see what vets they can bring in if they want to go to the next level. Also, while Jaren Jackson Jr. is a good player, and he was solid this series, we're seeing a Grizzlies team that maybe needs some more firepower and maybe needs a real number 2 next to Ja if they want to take that next step. Celtics versus Hawks. I came in the playoffs telling myself, oh, the only good matchup in the East is about to be Cleveland versus New York. And man, I was very wrong. This one started off bad. Boston was blowing Atlanta's back out. Things got a little greasy after a couple games, though. We got a classic Trae Young moment. Atlanta was thriving, even with DeJounte getting that questionable suspension. Another dude who people were saying was acting immature before the season started, but I'm not going to get into that. And ultimately, Atlanta was able to take the series to 6 games. I think now that Snyder is in Atlanta, they all gonna have to look to shake up the roster a little bit. He's inherited this roster, so it doesn't really have his imprint on it yet. So I think he's gonna make some changes. I'm not saying that's a Trae trade, but I also would not be shocked if Trae did end up somewhere else in this offseason, even though I personally think that would be a mistake. Celtics, on the other hand, they still have showed that they have some of the bad tendencies that they had last season that lost them in the finals. They still have times where their execution is boneheaded and dudes will be out there just doing whatever they want with no accountability, but luckily for them, the East is basically out for them this season. Embiid is hurt, the Bucks are eliminated. It'd be a major disappointment if they did not go back to the finals, but they've had some losses where they basically hand the game over to the other team. I mean, if we look at the finals last year, game 4, they basically handed the series over to the other team. So once they get that stuff out of the system, I can believe in them more, but they're not flawless. I know they're the favorite to come out the East right now, but you never know. They have some things they need to work on themselves. Warriors versus Kings. Okay, so this series, everybody always thought was going to be the fun one. Even before game 1, I thought the Kings would win the series. Honestly, I thought they could do it without that much resistance if they really put their foot down. I guess I was naive to think that. I thought the Warriors' road issues would carry on and they would struggle to win in Sacramento, but Sabonis was looking like a glorified Byron Mullins, and that was not on my bingo board. What makes it even worse is Sacramento had all the momentum on their side after that crazy Game 6 win. They could have ended it in a Game 7 at home with their crazy fans, but they blew it. They honestly had a little bit of a meltdown in the process. But, I mean, I guess it was a successful season for them, all things considered, but I do wonder where they go from here. I guess a lot will be on Keegan Murray's shoulders. He was a lotto pick. I guess they're going to need him to develop, but you know, like Draymond said, there's 82 game players and there's 16 game players. And this playoffs might have showed us that Sabonis is an 82 game player. Because coming in that series, a lot of people were looking at it like Draymond's probably going to dominate this dude and probably going to make him a pedestrian. And that's kind of what happened. Like, many people saw that coming. And it's hard to win if the guy people are saying is your best player, even though I disagree, ends up playing like butt cheeks. Now the Warriors, on the other hand, I think we can say they will never truly be out of the series as long as Curry is on that team. I think a lot of their flaws really came out this series, and guys like Clay and Poole were not pulling their weight, but they showed that they are still the Warriors, and they can go far if things go their way, which, let's be honest, things usually do go their way. I think this will be an interesting offseason for them, but that time we'll have to continue to wait because they move on to the next round. Honestly, I don't have much to say about this series. We saw the worst of both teams here, and it was still a sweep. The Sixers, we saw Embiid look gassed and play like a glorified Michael Olowokandi while flailing on the ground like a fish. We saw Harden turn into a glorified Bonzi Wells, and he struggled to get to the rim in certain games. The team will just look ugly for stretches, and it ends with Embiid getting hurt in the playoffs like clockwork. It's weird how all these guys are getting killed for not being available, but for Embiid, it happens every single year at the most important time of the year, no matter what. And he kind of gets away with it. I'm not going to get in that too much because I do think there's some stupidity for blaming people for injuries, even though there's some people that do deserve the blame. I do think if Embiid comes into the second round, we may have a chance to finally beat their boogeyman, the Celtics, but I'm honestly not going to hold my breath because that team owns them historically, so we'll see about that series. Now the Nets, they clearly ended up looking like a team that had only been playing with each other since the trade deadline. I think the Mikal Bridges story is really good for them, and he's emerged out of nowhere, and he can honestly be an all-star next year. But really, the roster doesn't make too much sense, and they're going to have to figure out that whole Ben Simmons situation. His salary is honestly just too much to field a competitive roster. They don't really have any incentive to tank because they don't have any other picks, so they're going to have to figure out a way to balance this roster, and that may end up with trading Ben Simmons. That probably will happen after they build up his value, though, because he hasn't played in so long, so we're going to have to see how their approach is because things can get pretty disastrous pretty quick with that Ben Simmons contract, so we'll see what the Nets do. Honestly, this was a telling series for the Suns. We all assumed it'd be a short series for them, and they would dominate the Clippers, who were hurt. But during most of the games, they looked like a team that was very beatable. Even though they ended up winning, their drop as the runaway favorites in many people's eyes. I think that's a good thing because it makes things more interesting this year. But I think it's going to be a challenge for them as they're having their star players play heavy minute, and they aren't immune to injuries themselves. KD and Book were already injured this season, and we know how CP3 will break down as the postseason comes along. Actually, as I'm saying this now, it turns out Chris Paul has injured himself and will not be able to play the next 3 games. You know, they've already been blown out against the Nuggets. So I still think they're capable of winning that series, but if they do so, I think it'll have to be in the Game 6 or Game 7. So we'll see how the Suns fare. Now the Clippers. What is there to say about them? Every year they get picked before the season starts as a team to beat. They're so deep, so talented. Then the season starts and their fans demanding their coach to be executed, demanding certain players to never see the floor and to be sent to Guantanamo. Then they flip-flop weeks later talking about, oh, that same player needs to play now, and the player that we wanted to play over the player before needs to play, and he doesn't need to play anymore. And it's just there's just a lack of accountability rather than just looking at your team and being like, maybe this isn't as good as we thought. I just wanted to mention something outside of the obvious of, their stars and their leaders not being available. And I use the term leader very loosely, but it's just kind of the same thing every year. So sometimes it's like, do you even want to talk about this team? To me, their offseason is easy. You got to bring back the same team. I don't think you can even trade Kawhi, not because no team wants him, but because he only wants to play in California. So teams would look at him like, why would I trade for him if he's going to leave? The only other team he would probably play for, you did everything in your power, legally and illegally, to keep him from going there. Doesn't make sense to get pennies on the dollar for Paul George either when you're a capped out team. So they'll probably bring back Russ on whatever exception they have, which I think isn't the worst move. I guess it always sucks to have a player and you just end up paying them more the next season. And their exception could go to someone that's, maybe a more pressing need for them. But I think Paul George will convince that front office, keep Russ in his postseason play. Even though I personally didn't put too much stock into it, we'll sway them the right way. Look for them to run it back, for better, for worse. Knicks versus Cavs. Okay, this was a series I was looking forward to the most in the East, funny enough, because I thought it would be the only good one. And it ended up ending in 5 games. I had the Knicks winning this one before it started because I thought they were tougher and more battle-tested than the Cavs, and I was basically right. I think the Cavs showed themselves to be a regular season team roster construction-wise. They need to fill that forward spot and get some wings real quickly. Donovan Mitchell did the thing he usually does, where he goes crazy in Game 1, and the series continues on, and he transforms into a glorified Eric Bledsoe. I think the Cavs need to keep building from within, but you got to think about some minor tweaks to take that jump to the next level as well. I know many want their coach going as well, so I could see that happening within a year or so. But really, you're really banking on Evan Mobley getting better, Darius Garland getting better, more acclimated, him and Donovan Mitchell working out together, things like that. So we'll see where they go from there. The Knicks showed that they are truly a Tom Thibodeau team. Say that 3 times fast. Not really much to say about them. I think if Randall comes back healthy, they could honestly beat the Heat in 6. But if he doesn't, it'll be an unfortunate exit for them, seeing how well they played this year, how good they played in the playoffs so far. Hard to see them beating the Celtics, but I think making it to the Eastern Conference Finals would be a good season for them. You just go back and you make some tweaks here and there. The Jalen Brunson signing was a home run. Build, maybe make a good trade, maybe make a big trade. You got some picks to give up, and we'll see from there. I think it's bright for the Knicks. So I'm going to go ahead and give my round 2 predictions, even though the second round has already started. I don't usually predict the exact amount of games. I like to get the range because, it's NBA, anything can happen. I think the Nuggets will advance in 6 or 7 games. This was my original prediction. It's not looking like it'll be right. I think the Lakers will advance in 6 or 7 games. I think the Celtics advance 4 or 5 games. Now it's obviously going to have to be 5. I think Miami advances in 6 or 7. Of course, these all depend on health and certain coaches not embarrassing themselves, but it's fun to make picks as the NBA is wide open this year. Usual stuff, blah, blah, blah. Go ahead and subscribe. I get it 500 or 1,000 or something. I'm giving away a jersey. It'll be a nice one too. I promise y'all, but nobody wants to follow and subscribe and all that stuff. So whatever, we'll see.